It's all began Kim Soo-hyun audio leak. It wasn't a news report or a press leak. It was an upload. The source was Lee Jin-ho, a YouTuber whose entire channel is built on a foundation of controversial exposes and takedowns of public figures. His method is chaos, and his weapon in this case was a raw, unlabeled audio file. When he pressed play for his audience, he wasn't just sharing audio, he was launching a narrative bomb. The tape was a confusing, intimate, and awkward thing to listen to. You could hear the rustle of movement, the distant clatter of a cafe, and voices locked in a tense, meandering conversation. One voice, a female voice, was immediately singled out by Lee Jin-ho as belonging to the actress Kim Soo-hyun. The other, a male voice, was part of the mystery. So, what was actually in this audio? The content was a dizzying mix of the boring and the potentially explosive. It opened with frantic apologies for being late, blaming traffic in the tunnel into New Jersey. There was casual chatter about Starbucks orders. "I ordered this and it's good." But then the tone would shift. The conversation turned personal, with the female voice referencing a long history with someone, saying she'd known him since he was little, and "since I was little." There were ambiguous but loaded references to a past relationship that allegedly began when one party was a minor, with phrases like, "What if he did something when he was a minor?" and "Then you dated them when you were a minor." Crucially, the name Kim Soo-hyun was woven into this tapestry. The voice did not directly confess anything, but invoked him as a figure from the past, mentioning he was known as Soo-hyun's older brother, and alluding to a connection that spanned from childhood to university. The conversation also included pressured requests like, "Please lend me $4,500, and defensive justifications about sharing information, saying things like, "That story is recorded for me." It was a messy, emotional, and confusing dialogue filled with half-finished thoughts and heavy implications. Lee Jin-ho's presentation was masterful in its manipulation. He offered zero context, no full transcript, just this jarring snippet. He framed it as a leak of catastrophic truth, a piece of a much larger and darker puzzle involving Kim Soo-hyun's private life. The internet, as it is designed to do, exploded. Fandoms braced for impact. Forums lit up with speculation. The media, seeing the traffic potential, amplified the noise. The question was no longer if this was scandalous, but how deep the scandal went. This was phase one, the detonation. But we live in the age of digital forensics, where every file leaves a fingerprint. The counterattack didn't come from a simple press release. It came from sound engineers and online detectives. Kim Soo-hyun's representatives, alongside a wave of independent analysts, made a stunning declaration. The tape wasn't just misleading. It was a physical fake, a manufactured piece of evidence. To prove it, they took the fight to the public screens with spectrograms, colorful, complex graphs that map sound. This is where the scandal transformed from a gossip story into a tech thriller. The analysts' findings were detailed and damning. They showed that the background ambient noise, the constant sonic fingerprint of a busy coffee shop, didn't behave like a real recording. In a real environment, that noise is a continuous wave. In this file, it showed brutal, vertical cuts. It would vanish into perfect silence the millisecond a specific voice began speaking, only to snap back on later. It was as if someone was manually muting the room. Even more compelling was the analysis of reverb, known as RT60, the acoustic echo of a space. In a genuine conversation in one location, all speakers share the same reverb pattern. The analysis claimed the voices on this tape had completely different acoustic signatures. One voice had the long tail of a reflective room. The very next voice was bone dry, as if recorded in a soundproof booth. The analysts highlighted specific instances from the conversation itself, like the phrase "because you know" that appeared twice. The spectrograms proved it wasn't just a similar phrase. It was the exact same audio clip, copied and pasted into another part of the conversation. This was no longer about interpreting the shocking words. This was about examining the digital DNA of the file that contained them, and the DNA, they argued, was synthetic. Faced with this technical evisceration, Lee Jin-ho didn't retreat. He escalated the narrative into the realm of a spy novel. He introduced a character, a shadowy, endangered informant. This person, he claimed, was the true source of the original untainted truth, the very conversation we just described. Their story was horrifying. They had been violently attacked, stabbed multiple times, and were in hiding. Lee Jin-ho wove a tale of the informant sending cell phones to the FBI for forensic analysis, of murder attempts, and of a powerful international conspiracy to protect Kim Soo-hyun and bury the truth. This served a critical psychological purpose. It created a reason, a compelling, emotional, dark reason for why the tape might seem edited. The edits, he could now suggest, were damaged from its violent journey or corruption by shadowy forces. It reframed the entire debate. For his supporters, it was simple. Why would an informant be nearly killed over a fake? This narrative battle created two absolute opposing realities for the public. In one, Kim Soo-hyun was a victim of a high-tech character assassination using forged audio, a sinister attempt to destroy her reputation with a manufactured conversation. In the other, Lee Jin-ho was a brave muckraker, fighting a powerful cover-up to expose a real dialogue, with the informant's scars as the ultimate proof. Kim Soo-hyun, whose name was hauntingly present in the audio, became a passive yet central figure in both storylines, either an unwitting prop in a smear campaign or a key to a hidden story. The scandal's lifeblood was the modern media ecosystem itself. Traditional news desks were paralyzed. How do you report on a story where the primary evidence is a conversation that requires a crash course in audio engineering to verify? Some tried, hosting panels with technicians, turning entertainment segments into science class, but the real war played out online. Kim Soo-hyun's fan base, often young and digitally savvy, didn't just post supportive messages. They became evangelists for the forensic analysis, spreading spectrogram images and technical breakdowns across social media, framing their defense as a stand against the coming wave of deepfake persecution. Conversely, Lee Jin-ho's audience and anti-fan communities dissected every legal document, championed the informant's saga, and viewed the technical arguments as an overly complex smokescreen created by a celebrity with expensive lawyers to explain away a damaging real conversation. The entertainment industry observed this from a distance with cold fear. This was a new, unmanageable threat. A scandal was no longer about managing a bad headline. It was about debunking a potentially fabricated digital artifact and the conversation within it, a process that could take weeks while reputations burned in the court of public opinion. So, what was the final verdict on the tape and its contents? There wasn't one. That's the most revealing part of this entire saga. No police department held a press conference to announce the tape was fake. No court issued a definitive ruling that satisfied the public's thirst for a clear answer on what was said. The scandal didn't conclude. It exhausted itself. The headlines faded, the YouTube analyses got fewer views, and the conversation moved on. But the residue remained. For Kim Soo-hyun, the association is permanent. Her name is now eternally linked to one of the internet's most convoluted he said, she said, but the computer said this controversies. For Lee Jin-ho, it was another chapter in his legacy as a rogue investigator, cementing his role for his followers and his reputation as a dangerous conspiracy theorist for his critics. But the true casualty was broader. The Kim Soo-hyun audio scandal was a public stress test on our collective ability to discern truth. It demonstrated that the most powerful tool in a modern controversy isn't necessarily the truth, but the most compelling narrative wrapped around the most convincing digital artifact. It weaponized doubt. It left everyone from casual observers to media professionals with a lingering unease. It asked a question we are still struggling to answer. In a world where audio can be edited, videos can be deepfaked, and a compelling, scandalous story can be built on a digital forgery, how do we know what's real anymore? The tape itself may be silent now, but the questions it raised are louder than ever.